Hey, today we're going to be breaking down some HR models and some common HR roles so that way you can be the next strategic HR manager of your organization. These will help you no matter what level you're at because it'll give you a great big picture understanding of an HR department's organization, including third party and outsourcing. Let's do it. All right. So last time we discussed the definition of HR. Do you guys remember what it was? I'll give you a few seconds. If you want to think about it a little bit longer, or even go back to the previous episode to think about it, I'll give you a few seconds to think. All right. So remember, the definition of HR doesn't actually matter that much, right? That's what we discussed. What matters are the functions that it does. So these are the 7 functions that we identified last time that OmniHR and myself use as the 7 core functions of HR. All right, so HR versus HRM. The really interesting thing about this part is that HR, obviously human resources, and then human resources management. So the things you want to think about this is HR is like the foot soldiers, what actually gets done, while HRM is more of the strategic level of it. So think just using those 7 core functions we discussed previously, at this stage, human resources would count as doing the full talent acquisition process and the recruitment and selection portion, while human resources management is more of setting the policies, setting the plan of action, setting the standard operating procedures that the team will use in the recruitment and selection process. So, doing a workforce analysis, conducting a training needs assessment for the training and development. Things like that are all part of the human resource management system. So kind of just think of it like the team that is boots on ground is doing the actual work versus the strategic level, the people that are planning the operation to be done. Do you consider HR important? So, if you are listening to this class, I would assume that you would at least understand the value of HR. I'll put it like this: every single large organization, every enterprise invests highly in HR, even though HR in itself is not a a revenue generating department. So why do you think that is? Well, if you want to expand after about 20 employees, that's going to be right around the time where you start feeling the pain of not having an HR department. That's the time that you really want to start investing in HR. It's very difficult to utilize all of your team members effectively without an HR department. Now, you can do it without one. So I don't want to make it seem like, not having an HR department is going to make or break you. The functions of HR need to be done whether or not you have a dedicated HR department. So this is actually something that an entrepreneur, a new business owner, even like a manager or the C-suite of an organization, it's important to understand all of the functions of HR because the functions need to be done. Whether or not you have a chief human resource officer or an HR manager actually taking care of it. When you think of HR models, typically you're thinking of the traditional HR function. But in actuality, there's actually a few different models you can use, and it's important to understand them, especially in the human resource management side of things, because depending on your organization, what your specific needs are, that will depend on what your model is going to be like. So there's a lot of different models that organizations can basically adopt. So it's very important that you understand them, and that way you can utilize them for your own benefit. The traditional HR model is the one that people usually think about. So it has all the functions are centralized, and so they have a dedicated HR team that focuses on each individual task. For example, your talent acquisition is going to be focused on solely by the recruiter. Your training and development team will be focused on by your training specialist, kind of things like that. So each individual function is focused on by an individual team member. So that's kind of the unique thing about the traditional HR. The strategic HR model, its functions focus, like, it still does the HR functions, but it focuses more on the entire organization's strategic goals and objectives, and it kind of focuses more on those objectives during the individual activity. So this might not sound like a big difference, but it actually is focusing more on the strategic side of things, starting at the top level. So this would be viewed kind of like your HR manager, HR director, or even HR business partner would go directly and sit with the C-suite or sit with the high-level organizations team, and then they would be the ones that would bring the HR ideas first and foremost to the organization, and they would actually work as like strategic partners to the senior leadership. So this one is a little bit different. It helps a lot if you're trying to improve culture, specifically like a high performing culture, increasing employee engagement, driving growth and innovation as well. With the shared services, you think of it more like the department compartmentalizing like the specifics functions of what it needs. For example, here in this pictures, you could think of the yellow would be training and development. So you have one core team that does all the training and development for the entire organization. They won't necessarily just think about, assisting one department or assisting, or being like an HR business partner that does multiple things. They have one focus and they do it well. The red one or might be pink, but that one would be like recruiting and selection. So they would do all the talent acquisition for the entire organization. So these would be split up kind of departments that focus on their specific niche. And that's how they do the shared services side of things. This helps a lot with scaling. So with this, you don't necessarily have to think about, oh, well, our organization is growing really quickly. Like that's fine. You just develop more of the departments that you need. And then those departments will then just focus on the specific tasks they have. Outsourcing, OmniHR being a outsourcing organization, I find outsourcing pretty interesting. One of the reasons that it really helps out for small to medium sized businesses that may not be able to invest as much as, let's say, a large organization, developing all the things that they would need to have a fully functioning HR department. So right about 20 employees is when you are going to start needing a HR department. And the reason is just as businesses grow, it becomes a lot more difficult to manage everything, by yourself. At that stage, you might have, your core leadership and then just team members. So with that, having an HR department will help you be able to focus on all the 7 functions, which in itself helps you scale up. So there's 3 main types of outsourcing or third-party HR organizations. You've got your HR consulting, which is basically someone that just tells you what to do and then you do it. You've got your professional employer organization. So that one includes more of like the HR services side. So with the HR services side, typically they will do 1 or 2 functions. So they'll do your payroll for you, or they'll recruit for you, or they'll make, training videos for you. But it's actually pretty rare to see one organization that does all 7. Omni HR does. So just throwing that out there. And then the last one would be a software side. So providing a human resource information system, human resources management system that is given to an internal HR department that is able to then kind of make things easier for them. They can include more employee self-service software and things like that to kind of lessen the load of just sending out papers or doing everything manually. With the HR business partner side, the HR business partner will work directly with a department or a group. So the way this has worked, at least for myself in the past, has been we will work. Basically, we had 2 HR business partners. I'll just use myself as an example to make it a little bit easier to see. So we had 2 HR business partners, and I was focused on half of the organization's departments, and then the other business partner was focused on the other half of the organization's departments. And we would do all the recruiting for them. We would work directly with them if we had to develop new policies or update anything for any employee relations, talent acquisition, every single 7 functions we did directly with that department. So this is actually pretty interesting though, because it gives kind of a face to the departments. Like they knew like I was their guy. Like if they needed something, I was the person they would talk to first. And that has its own benefits. Knowing that there's someone in HR who has your back no matter what, or who at least like who is dedicated to your team, that has a lot of benefits to it. So I enjoyed the HR business partner. It also, working in HR, it gave me the ability to really focus in on who my team was. The holistic approach, in my view, is less of a model based off how you organize the organization and more of like the goal. So the goal for a holistic approach is basically considering your employees first, considering your team members first, and understanding that the life cycle of each team member, how happy they are, making sure that they have solid work life balance, um, doing all of that plus achieving the business objectives. That's where the holistic style kind of comes in. It's not necessarily how you structure your team, but it's basically how you structure your services to your team members that makes it holistic. So these are just a few of the really common HR models out there, but you can really play around with it. Like I said, it's really when it comes to human resources management, this is part of the biggest issue, like the not issues, but this is part of the biggest decision factors that you have to implement is, do I want to have an HR business partner and have someone dedicated to a department? Or do I want to go more traditional route and have a specific team member who focuses on one specific objective? And then if you kind of want to expand on that side of things, then you have the shared services side. Or if you're a small to medium sized organization, maybe you don't want to take the risk of having, a recruiter when you're not actually growing that fast. Maybe you want to hire a third party for an outsource. So these are all the things that you want to consider, and it's very important at the human resources management level because these are strategic decisions. This isn't something that an entry level HR generalist will likely be considering. This is something that a higher level VP or a chief human resource officer, HR director, like it would be that level making the decision of the model that your organization will adopt. You need to consider your specific organization, kind of how you want to build up your HR department and what you want to focus on, what matters the most to you and your company. I wanted to go over the organization structure first so that way you can, when we go over the roles, you can start thinking about where you can plug and play and how you want to play around with your team. And like I said, this is really a more of a high level overview of the actual structure itself. And if you're looking to be an HR manager or an HR leader, these are what you need to understand in those roles. So first off, understanding general versus specialty. I'm not going to insult anyone's intelligence. I'm going to give you a very basic overview, and I'm going to hit very briefly on all of these specific groups. So first off, general versus specialty. When it comes to general HR roles, you're really just thinking of someone that does multiple functions, as opposed to specialty is you're thinking of they are doing one thing and they are great at it, right? At least that's the goal. So general, think of a jack of all trades. Specialty, think of someone who is really just focusing on one of those functions. HR generalists, I consider them a pawn. Why? Not because they're weak, because they actually have the ability to grow and become anything. An HR generalist is very versatile. They do literally everything on the board. Um, they can typically start off, it is considered an entry level position. And they typically just start off doing whatever's needed. They can create education following the training and development route. They can work in the payroll side of things. They can work in recruitment. So it really just depends on what it is you need them to do, but they're very versatile. And one of the biggest things for a pawn is that when it gets to the end of the board, it can become anything it wants, right? So it can focus, it can find a niche that it really likes and just pursue that. It can stay general and keep enjoying the lifestyle of, kind of just doing whatever doing a little bit of everything, or it can grow and end up becoming a queen or becoming a king in the sense of being a VP of HR, being a chief human resource officer, and things like that. For recruiter recruits, right? So they do the full talent acquisition process. You can think of more entry level recruiter as someone that just does a direct to hire, very simple. And then you can think of a more advanced recruiter as someone who is a headhunter, right? They're looking for that one special role and they are going to make sure that they find it. Training and development specialists, so going through the full training and development roster, compliance, onboarding, all of these fall under training and development. And this is really an important role because this is what is going to, how ready is your team going to be? That's the responsibility of the training and development side of things. Compensation benefits, how happy are your team members going to be? Are they going to have a very solid compensation plan, or is it going to be one where your team members are always complaining and never happy? This is going to be, very important. Employee relations, how much do your team members think that they're being heard? If they complain to you, is that complaint getting tossed up and thrown in the trash can, or is it actually going to be taken seriously? Is someone going to listen to it, and then is an action going to come out from that complaint? HR information systems and specialist. So this is going more on the software side. This is actually more of a tech role. So when it comes to tech, basically being a database admin, understanding how to, sift and analyze a lot of information, how to use software, that all comes down to this. This role actually changes a lot based off of the level they are. Technically, all of them do. An entry level versus a senior level, each of these specialties have their own growth phases. So it really just depends kind of on what level you're at, will depend on what functions you're going to be doing. An organizational development specialist. So with this one, you're kind of goes kind of hand in hand with training and development. The reason is because this one kind of focuses more on very specific projects. Like maybe they just focus on building out an onboarding project, or they focus on some other organization or some other field that will help move the organization forward and help build out that competency level in the company. Labor relations, this would go more into the legal side of the compliance and the benefits module. So they would kind of want to know they would want to know a little bit more about how to analyzing, interpret, and administering like labor contracts and things like that. So kind of knowing a little bit more about the legal side of the compliance, about the employee relations, and about the employment contracts. HR business partner. So HR business partner, I kind of made into a queen. The reason is because just like the HR generalist, it is a general role. One HR business partner can be in charge of all 7 functions of HR. So having that understanding, the HR business partner is a little bit more unique in which it's not a specialty. Just like the generalist, it is a general role and it can be responsible for a ton of things. So this is a little bit more of like a more advanced jack of all trades. Next up, you've got the HR manager, director, and VP. So I have these as the king. Obviously, the shareholders, the team is going to be the real king. But when it comes to who's actually directing the team itself, here you've got it. So these are going to be the ones that are really managing the strategic level, understanding how the HR's functions are helping push forward the strategic objectives of the organization as a whole. So now you kind of understand what the models you can build and then what pieces you have. So it's really just playing around with it and figuring out what works best for you. Like I said, every organization is completely different. Some may function better with an HR business manager focus, as opposed to another one may want to outsource in the beginning and then expand. So it really just depends on you. The point is, you now have the tools you need to be able to model something you want. Something that I would recommend is talk to your leadership in your organization, see if your current model is actually doing the best that it can to push forward your organization. Maybe right now the strategic level is a little bit more important, and making sure that the team members and all the department leaders have an HR partner that they can speak to directly is going to be the most beneficial. So it really just depends on your organization, but now you have the tools you need to make it best. Hey, if you enjoyed today's video, check us out next time where we're going to go over recruitment and selection. It's going to be a very deep dive on the full talent acquisition process. It's great for anyone who's looking to recruit or just in general looking to lead a recruiting team. So I'll see you next time.